of Morning at NTV. We are going to be discussing Uganda's commercial prospects for oil drilling in light of the launch of the spudding process. Just a preamble before we get underway. Several government officials gathered to witness the commencement of drilling works for the Kingfisher oil field, as in effect marks the start of trials for oil drilling using the rig that was hauled into the country last August and assembled in November. The process will culminate in commercial production of oil in late 2025 but could stretch into 2026. The stock tank of in-place oil in the KFDA is estimated at around 800 million barrels, of which 25% will be developed in phase 1, producing about 40,000 barrels of oil per day during peak production. The capital expenditure for development of the KFDA is worth a staggering $2 billion. We are now joined by our guest, Dickens Asime Carter. He is economist and head of oil and gas Crystal Advocates. He'll be helping us understand the dynamics around this particular project and its prospects. However, let's bring you up to speed with exactly what happened yesterday as President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni presided over the launch of the drilling process.
President Museveni launching oil drilling activities, a moment long awaited by Ugandans and oil companies in the country.
I have heard of these, what they call local content and all that. But for me, the biggest local content, which all of you can participate in, is agriculture. Producing food. Because all these people who work in the oil fields need food. You got your computers running. You have a computer. Yes, grow food so that these people buy food from you people. Eggs, chicken, milk.
Also present on this historic day, the regulator, Petroleum Authority Chief Executive, calling the ceremony a great milestone.
At the end of 2022, a total of $1.7 billion United States dollars had been invested in the development of this oil field. About $580 million is expected to be invested in the Kingfisher development project in this year, which we have started. And a similar amount, about $580 million, is expected to be invested in 2024.
Kingfisher area is taking shape. Although Ugandans won't see actual oil from today's launch, the stage has been set according to officials and the joint venture partners.
It is an important milestone in the development of Uganda's oil industry and will definitely have far-reaching impacts on the socio-economic transformation of Uganda. Following the announcement of FID less than 1 year ago on February 1st, 2022, with the full support and efforts of all parties,
today's spudding launch puts the country on the road to producing some 40,000 barrels of oil per day from the Kingfisher well. 31 wells are to be drilled from this launch. 3 remaining rigs will, according to officials, set up later in the Tilenga area.
It's just a commissioning of the oil rig and spudding the first well for production purposes within this field. But there will be timelines along which the 31 wells will be drilled in this area, and then the 400 and so many wells that will be drilled in Tilenga. When you drill the wells, you connect in-field pipelines to gathering stations to collect the volume, and then you transfer that to a central processing facility.
The well is a joint venture between the Uganda National Oil Company, which owns 15% stake in the Kingfisher area, alongside Total and Sinop. Meanwhile, a total $2 billion is to be spent up to the time of production. It's been years since Uganda discovered commercially viable oil deposits here in the Albertine Graben and has been working day and night to take the oil out of the ground and send it to the markets across the world. Today here in Kingfisher, operated by CNOOC from China and other oil fields like Tilenga, is a hive of activity. Despite criticism from climate change activists on the dealings of a country in as far as oil and climate change is concerned, that did not deter the country's efforts to go on and develop. Indeed, one could say, looking at the activities right now, the putting up of the rigs and drilling, the target for 2025 could be met. Malcolm Sime, NTV Tonight.
Many thanks. That is, of course, Malcolm Sime reporting for us last evening in light of the launch of the spudding process and, of course, the commencement of drilling of oil at the Kingfisher oil well. Now, joining me on the show is Dickens Asimwe Carter. He's an economist and the head of oil and gas at Crystal Advocates. Very welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting me here. It's my pleasure.
It's all good. Bring us up to speed with what is no doubt a landmark event when it comes to Uganda's economic prospects.
Thank you very much, and I think like Malcolm put it, and the show that basically was hosted yesterday, I think where we are now, it's a no turning back point. So because when someone says it's a spudding ceremony, like we said, it's basically the start of drilling operations. I'm actually a lawyer, although I'm also an economist on the other end, but I'll speak to it slightly in terms of a little bit of engineering, where we are and what does this mean and where does this take us.
That's right.
Because when you talk about spudding, generally you're talking about, because what happens is that preparations have been ongoing all along. Of course, there was word that oil had been taken away; it was being taken in tankers, and I mean that doesn't make sense if you really understand the small and basics of how this drilling happens. That's right. So spudding, basically, you've prepared the area. Maybe you have a dry hole rig, a small rig earlier on, which basically does the first hole, a shallow hole. It's basically after that you do some casings, and then you do some cementing, and then this rig that you basically saw yesterday, what it does is that it has a drilling bit, it has a drilling collar, it has a carry, and all these are basically put into a drilling plus a drilling pipe, and all these are put together and they are inserted down there. So basically when they go down there, depending on the level of drilling and the depth that you've agreed upon, I mean the scientists have agreed upon, when that is reached, then you basically perforate the casing that had been there, either by using sand and pressure, and then you can also perforate the rocks to basically make them more permeable, and then the oil will basically move into that pipe, and we expect that it would be able to basically bring itself up on the ground by the pressures, because it's a new well. It's a new well. But over time, when that starts going down, like they said, maybe 50,000 barrels for about 5 years, when that production peak starts going down, then I think Kingfisher will basically be going around into the Kaisotonia area to basically support this production at this point. So after this spudding has been done, basically the start of operations, we expect that all these wells are going to be prepared. And then we see this happening in about 2025, basically the target that the government had set. Because as you can tell, this is 2023, you have 2025. So basically this spudding means that you're preparing wells for production. Otherwise you can't produce unless you have an evacuation point. You don't have a pipeline, you don't have a refinery, so you're only preparing this, and it must go concurrently with the development of the pipeline to be able to produce and get yourself to Tanga or supply some to the refinery whenever it is up and ready and on stream.
All right, that's very interesting, but of course all I can hear is that we are now at the point where we can effectively say we are an oil nation.
Yes, that's right.
$360 million per year will be the expected reap from this as a country. What does that mean for economic development?
Economic development, of course, the first point that you would speak to is the GDP. So you have this GDP running up because of the monies that are incoming. You have linkages, sectoral linkages, you know, the money coming in, and then you have it in agriculture, you have it in developing infrastructure, and then all the backward and forward linkages then all lead to all this kind of development. But of course, you also talk about employment, because there are many other things there. You have supply of goods and services, you have employment. The last time I checked, I need to double check again, but I think they were saying that the people that we will have employed here in Uganda as Ugandans, URA would actually be able to reap about $58 million US per month as pay as you earn. And that is massive in my opinion. And all these other supply of goods, you have taxes being paid. I mean, if the other day I saw the ED talking about the spend of about $237 million on the Kingfisher project. If you put some tax element onto that, then you definitely are going to be talking about a lot of monies that the Revenue Authority will be reaping here and there.
Okay. You are a lawyer, and being the head of oil and gas at Crystal Advocates, I'm inclined to think that you know the detail when it comes to the oil agreements that government has been getting into, or the ones that have been signed before. There was a bit of a controversy on the agreements earlier, something that, of course, kind of gave the naysayers the momentum to say most of what they said, especially that the oil was not going to materialize, that is the production, and that we were steadily apparently sliding into the curse. That is a discussion that I don't want to go into. Just bring us up to speed with the agreements and who is benefiting most, because we already know, we've already spoken about the fact that the pipeline is something that is going to be done in line with the production process. We already know we don't own much in Yakop. Does that translate? Is it something that we're also looking at this other side? Are we on the peripheral side of ownership when it comes to ripping?
I think one thing that maybe the government needs to step out. I'm not a mouthpiece for the government, but of course I understand this, and definitely I realize that there are two problems on the misalignment of the communication of how the ECOP is structured and how the upstream is structured. Now, I could bring you up to speed on that in 1 minute.
Please
Number
do.
one,
Please do.
What regime does Uganda run in terms of petroleum activities? We run a production sharing agreement regime. What does this mean? It means that the government, like they said yesterday, is going to put data together and then ask for people to come and bid in a licensing round. So you come, you bid in a licensing round. There is a model production sharing agreement which can be accessed online. Everyone can see how that is modeled. And what that production sharing agreement basically says is that you come, you invest your money. If you hit the oil, then you can recover your money as we start production. Now, when you recover the money, we have so it's production sharing agreement. So I could give you an example of what I would call a split of a barrel. So this is a drum. A barrel would be about 159 liters. Yeah. So this is a drum.
A barrel is 150.
About 159, 156, 159 liters. Because that's American.
Yeah.
So, but for argument's sake, let's use 10 liters. So in a production sharing agreement profile, if we produced 10 liters today, the government would take off what we call royalties. First and foremost, at the time of signing the agreement, the government took what they call a signature bonus. That's your take number one.
Take number one.
You have a signature bonus at the time when the sharing agreement is signed, before the works are done. Then these guys commit, because you have work programs, they commit, they give guarantees on how they're going to process this, etc. When the oil is found, when the oil is not found, unfortunately, the other guy dusts himself, makes a loss, and counts his loss and goes home, unfortunately.
That's the nature of the business.
That's the nature of the business. Yeah. It's a casino of sorts. So if you find the oil, then you produce the 10 liters, the government will take what they call royalties, about 6%, let's say. So you already got the signature bonus, you produce 10 liters of crude, the government takes about 6% of that. After that, you have a cap. So you agree that when you produce 10 liters, some of those liters are going to go into the payment of the past costs that you used, that the company,
the company that is
basically invested to bring this oil on the ground.
Okay.
So you basically take off that money, which is audited, like the ED was saying yesterday.
Yeah.
So the regulator, who is the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, basically approves the budgets, approves the procurement process, and the Auditor General basically does the final audit.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, you agree that this production cost us 1 million. When you put 1 million into the liters, then of the 10 liters, you take off some money to go and pay for the past costs. Then you get into the share, the real share. Now, you could have a percentage of maybe government taking 60% or 30%, the other people taking 30% or 75-25. But I'm sure it's about 60 to 70. What I heard is that we had one of the best production sharing agreements in Africa. Now, that's what it is.
Okay.
Now, when you go to the ECOP, where I think that we have a misalignment, and the government needs to give this to its citizens.
Yeah.
You see, our regime of the production sharing agreement, like the stream, you have the upstream like a river. So you basically produce the crude, you reach what we call a manifold. A manifold at the point after the crude has gotten out of the ground, gone into the central processing facility, it is stabilized, you remove the sand, the water, and everything. Then you move it at the point of a manifold, you take some to the refinery in Kabade, and then at that point you have a measurement point. So you measure how much crude has actually reached here, how much goes to the refinery, how much is headed out to Tanga. Now, it's the production sharing agreement stops here. It's where you delineate the upstream from. From there, you start a midstream.
Okay.
Now, that midstream is a business. It's a going concern. It's a business like Coca-Cola. It's a business like Hima Cement.
That's right.
So at that point, some countries like Kenya would actually build the pipeline, and you recover the money from the upstream. Now, the government of Uganda was smart to delineate it from there, because originally their plan was actually to get all the crude and refine it. Of course, there was a commercial discussion there where they said, gentlemen, look, we can't put all our crude in the refinery. What if the refinery is down for maintenance? We have to stop our fields, etc. Now, at that point, it's a commercial discussion. So there is an East African crude oil pipeline company, the ECOP company, the SPV, the special purpose vehicle.
That's right.
Which basically has Total owning 62%. UNOC, Uganda National Oil Company, holding 15%. The Tanzanian equivalent of the National Oil Company holding 15%. And SINOC holding 8%. So if the argument is that we are losing out in the ECOP, SINOC only holds 8%.
UNOC.
For God's sake. SINOC. The one that launched yesterday.
Yeah.
Holds 8%
Only
in the
8%
ECOP. Only 8% in the ECOP. UNOC holds more than SINOC. Tanzanian equivalent of UNOC holds more than SINOC. Total holds 62 because it was the biggest driver. So it's an investment. So everyone has actually put money up front. We have had equity injections. So UNOC is going to put in about $300 million. Tanzanian guys are going to put in about $300 million. Total is going to put in about $1.5 billion or so. It's an investment. And when you put in the money in that ECOP investment, you reap it because it is paid back by what you call a tariff, a transportation tariff. So you enter into what they call a TTA, a tariff transportation agreement. At that point, everyone who ships in that pipeline, pays about $12.77 a barrel. So that money goes back to the ECOP company. It actually pays for the debt and also pays the operational fees. So it's a going concern. It's not an issue of saying that you own less or you own much. You own much only where you hold it better in the upstream. In the midstream, it's a business.
Okay.
You put in how much you put in, how much you take out. As simple as that.
All right. This latest development puts us very much in touching distance of the production. I do not know whether we must question or not. Many times when we do, we are branded naysayers. Between now and 2025, what are the measures that are in place that we know of that will not see the nation stumble like we've seen on many of the initiatives that have been undertaken? All
right. I think this is best explained, like I said, the business angle.
Yeah.
You take it from a business angle.
Business
angle. Even minus regulation, SINOC needs to make money. That's their business.
That's right.
They have shareholders that they report to. They're not your uncles, they're not your aunties. They're here to make some money. Total is here to make some money.
Yeah.
UNOC, the Uganda National Oil Company, is holding the interests of the state and commercial interests of the government to make money on the other end. Now, at the time when you take a final investment decision that was taken about a year ago, maybe, and everyone was saying Kingfisher, CNOOC was doing pretty well because they've been able to prepare all these wells, put in casings and drop a rig in exactly 11 months from the time I think they did a final investment decision. But I'll tell you why you don't even need the regulator to basically get the production out. But also speak about the regulator bit. These guys have brought in a rig on their own money. These guys have mobilized, maybe between Total and CNOOC, they'll have mobilized 6,000 expatriates. Some of them earning $1,000, $2,000 a day on the rig. They're losing money. They can only make back that money when they are producing. As simple as that. The economics, the science, the shareholder requisition and requirement will get them working their heads off day and night to produce this oil. But also as a regulator, like we said, you have a plan. From the time you get an exploration license to the time you produce, you have a plan, you have a discussion, you have all these working groups between the regulator, the ministry, and CNOOC. So definitely, I can see this happening in the time they have put, because they need to get their money earlier and get it out, as simple as that. So the economics will basically be the riding factor here.
All right, very interesting dynamics there. Of course, most of them are very, very technical, but like you say, it has all the business angle to it. And of course, the players in it are well renowned, and you cannot, of course, discount the ability for them to be able to make some profit for themselves and for the Ugandan. In terms of paying back the cost of what they have incurred, how much are we talking about at around this time? Is there any information that has been availed?
But of course, principally, by the time we start producing, of course, everyone speaks about, I think the newspapers are talking about it every other day, $10 billion to $15 billion.
Quickly, yeah.
Yeah, but $10 to $15 billion, you remove the pipeline, which I already said is a commercial concern, so no one pays back that. The refinery, they also count it in the 15 billion or so. You remove it because it's a commercial concern, it's a going concern. So you only have the upstream, the investment in the upstream. So you will be talking about 2 billion for Kingfisher, talking about 3 times that, maybe about 7 billion for Tirenga, because you're talking about 31 wells in Kingfisher and talking about 429 wells on Tirenga. So 3 times, 4 times about there. So you could be talking about 7 to 8, 9, 10 billion. Now, like I already explained, you have a cap because you won't allow anyone to take back what they have invested at a go, because then they will suck all the crude. They will suck all the money. They will suck all. So you basically, the science there is that you have they call it a recoverable cap. Recoverable cap. So if you're producing 10 liters, you can only recover with only 6 liters. 60% of what you produce is only what you can recover with. The 40 has to be shared amongst the other stakeholders. All right,
Dickens Simekata, many thanks. We shall now go into a short break. We shall return and answer what is no doubt the concerns of some of the other sector players and stakeholders when it comes to the projects around oil production in the country. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. That are just joining us, we have Dickens Simekata. He's an economist and the head of oil and gas at Crystal Advocates, helping us understand the dynamics and exactly what this is in terms of prospects for national transformation for a country like Uganda. Allow me engage you on something that is pertinent. Development has a cost. Environmentalists have been vocal about some of these developments and the fact that there is going to be a lot of destruction of ecosystems. That, within the agreements, is pretty much taken care of. What assurances are there that some of the stories we've heard, especially from countries like Nigeria, oil spills, into rivers and many of those occurrences, is something that has been sufficiently attended to and won't be allowed to be frequent or even to happen?
Good. You started from a point of noting that development has a cost, but I don't think that this cost, if taken care of, really has an issue per se as much. But first and foremost, I think the government has been ready. It has readied itself in proceeding and taking care of this. The NEMA guys are on the ground, up and running. They have all these oil spill contingency plans in place. And I think before the production started, the government went out and did what we call the Albertine Sensitivity Atlas. So they have an atlas that basically speaks to how sensitive every ecosystem is, and then they would have to follow through that and understand how it has been affected over the years. Every 5 years or 10 or so, you then basically come and say, this is what it was. These were the many birds in this. These were the many things in the rivers. This was the flow, and this is how it has been affected. So you have a sensitivity atlas that basically guides everyone going forward. Everyone has done an EIA, environmental impact assessment. NEMA is checking them up and down. So I think they're prepared to do that. And of course, at some point, if that is taken care of well, then I don't have a problem. I don't think it's an issue. And secondly, with the Green Revolution, everyone up in arms trying to take them on, the European Union talking and everyone talking, I think the development partners and the government themselves have decided to say, okay, fine, we're going to take on these guys, but to take them on, we must go ready and good, because they can always come back to us. So I think that also has helped the process, where everyone is now very cautious, and it will help the process 100%.
The compensation regime. There were concerns that some of the monies that were given, either people were compensated less the value of their land and natural resources. How has that been addressed? From
where I stand, I think first and foremost, how does a resettlement action plan happen? You basically get people to get in there, do a study, and understand the value of the land, etc. If it's a government project, the guy who's going to give you the values is the chief government valuer. The chief government valuer is going to give you values that are known, that are the district, for every crop, plant, tree, etc. Moving a grave, a heart, everything that you're talking about. So this value is basically known. It's at the districts. You can understand. You can get there and check it in. So, and I think the partners have done that. The government started by actually taking on 29 square kilometers, I think, for the petroleum park, and they were paying about 4 million shillings, I suppose, per acre then. The only problem that I see, and which we all know in these development and infrastructure projects, is that everyone expects a petrodollar. So when you're talking about petrodollar, everyone thinks that what is supposed to be 4 million should become 8 million and 10 million. I think that's where the problem is. And secondly, we know what happens. If you pay this guy, he simply goes and marries the second wife, buys a big car, and that's all. And 1 year down the road, they'll be broke again. And then they'll say, I was moved from my land by this project and I was never paid. So those are the issues. And you can't force guys to actually take a resettlement, because the guys who have been resettled have been given houses and areas to till, land. So those can never complain. But the guys who take cash, eat it and complain.
Allow me put this to a lighter perspective. You said when the guy is given the money, he'll go marry a wife, buy a big car. How about if it is a lady? What do they do?
Maybe they marry a second man or something like that.
Interesting. That doesn't happen that way. But of course, it's something that it's a stereotype that needs to change. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Within the region, we see infrastructure development. Of course, the ecosystem requires that there are services that shall support the people that will be working, and the hotels are sprouting up, condominiums are being built. How is the economy in this particular region doing right now? Is it something you can say, well, thriving is an understatement?
I think it is thriving heavily. And I mean, we've had colleagues going down to do some work. They can't find where to sleep.
Yeah, that's a concern. How is this being addressed? I do not know whether there is a deliberate effort to invite investors, especially to undertake those projects.
I think
it's being left to the workings of economics.
It will be the workings of the economics, but also what we need to be cautious about, and for everyone who is intending to partake in this bonanza, is that we have 3 years where the 10 billion or so everyone talks about is going to be spent during development. When production starts, you have 6,000 expatriates today. 6,000 expatriates will go down to 600. So if you have also sprouted up hotels, apartments in Kololo, they'll be stuck. They'll be white elephants.
Yeah.
So we must be cautious and have a divide of how we basically cautiously run with this. So if they gave you a tender to bring pipes from Mombasa and there are 500 trips, by 4,000 you make $2 million, or maybe it's $20 million. But then you don't buy the 200 trucks. Because after you've transported the pipes, then you're stuck with the trucks. So the principle is that if they give you a tender to actually bring these pipes, and you're the guy with the tender, just run around town and get everyone who has 2, 5, 10 trucks. Okay. Patch them up. That's why JVs are important and everything. And then do the job. Joint ventures and stuff like that. Synergizing, basically. Yeah. But if you decide to say, I'm gonna run and sell my house and buy trucks, after you've done this in 3 years, you'll be stuck with your trucks. Wow. So if you put up all this accommodation down in Hoima, what happens after 3 years? That's why, for example, they have camps. The Tilenga area has a camp which is, I think, a 6,000 man camp, a camp that can actually sleep 4,000 people. It's more
like a satellite city.
Yeah. So they will do that, and Kingfisher has one for 1,600, I think. But these, you can actually move them away. If the people go, you can demobilize them.
Okay, very quickly, we don't have a lot of time left to us. Let's use 2.5 minutes. Just take a Ugandan through what we shall be able to do with oil money. There are projects that have been controversial, and Ugandans have thought we could have used these with our own money without borrowing. The expressways we are building, the need to construct ports and new cities, for example. What can we do with oil money?
Infrastructure. Make sure people are educated. Make sure the roads are in place. Basically, sustainability. First and foremost, I think what has been key is that you make sure, because, you know, if you told these guys to actually get this oil out of the ground in 5 years, they could. But what does that do? It injures the reservoir.
Sure.
So you have to ask them to have a production profile. Starting wells, you ramp up, you have peak, you go down. So you are basically able to produce for 25 years. So in that 25 years, you're able to basically, the economy is able to sink and swallow the money systematically, not in a night. Okay. Because otherwise, when that happens, then that's when you have that economic problems, basically of inflation and all that.
Yeah, I'm glad you speak about inflation. Very quickly, our debt to GDP is around 53%. The official estimate for Uganda's GDP was $108 billion. Dollars rather at the end of 2022. And in purchasing parity terms, are we in a better place, especially given the prospects?
100%. The dollar rate will definitely go down because you're going to be earning in dollars. You're basically speaking to the fact that, of course, the Totals and the Sinox will also take their money. But I'm sure from the production profile that we have, you have like the Uganda National Oil Company maybe being able to basically sell about 1 million Suezmax cargo at the port, times maybe about $100, $70. That's some good money. And you're bringing in Forex, you're able to do that, and you're able to do well. I think the GDP is actually, just in the 3 years with the injection of the monies that are coming in, is able to basically spike and jump by about 9.8% from what the economists have been running.
All right, any last words?
Of course, like I said, you are talking about the local content. Everyone speaks to it and everything like that. Like I've said, of course, the government has put in place very good laws, regulations, and policies. The biggest question will definitely be how this is implemented to the latter, and how every other stakeholder basically plays part of their end, and that's how it only happens.
All right, Dickens Asimekata, economist and head of oil and gas at Crystal Advocates. Many thanks for the analysis, the perspective, and helping us understand some of these dynamics when it comes to the latest development in as far as Uganda's trajectory to economic transformation is